Okay, so good morning. Today's daf is daf Ayin Gimel. We are on Ayin Bet Amud Bet at the beginning of the seventh chapter of Masechet Menachot, and we will get started in just a moment. I'm going to share my screen. Now, couple of interesting things to note as we start Masechet Menachot Perek Zion, the seventh chapter. So uh, and specifically before we begin, you probably will notice if you're looking at the page that suddenly the Rashi on the left-hand side of the page is much smaller than it used to be. And that is because what we have on the left-hand side of the page is the Rashi that was published with the Gemara for the last 500 plus years, starting sometime in the early 16th century. Then, in a few years later, Rabbi Bezalel Ashkenazi, who is the author of the Shita Mekubetzes, who you'll find in most Vilna Shas's on the right-hand side of your page in Maseches Menachot, on the far right in the margin, it says Shita Mekubetzes. So the author of that, or really the compiler of that, he compiled the thoughts from a number of people, noted that the Rashi that was printed in that early Shas, a few years before, around when he was born, was not in fact Rashi. And that you could see that in some of the times when Tosos quotes Rashi, that language isn't there. And so Rabbi Betzalel Ashkenazi notes that he had a handwritten manuscript or handwritten marginalia that actually was Rashi. And that is ended up being now included in our Vilna Shas in the bottom where it says Rashi Kaf Taf Yud. And that stands for Kisvei Yad, handwritten. And so now on each daf, we have both the original Rashi and the Rashi compiled by Rabbi Ashkenazi's handwritten comments. And so I'm expecting that we will use both of them over the course of today. Course of the coming weeks. And it is true from chapter 7, which we begin today, through chapter 10. And so that's point number 1 by way of introduction. And you can see here we go. If you take a look, a very small writing right underneath where it says Rashi Kisvei Yad, it says Miperik ve'elu minachos, from this chapter ad Perik Shtei Alechem, ne'atek b'kitvei Yad Kodesh shel Rabbeinu Betzalel Ashkenazi Zichron Tzarek Levraka al Gilyon Hashas Shalo, that he had a handwritten comments on his Gemara, Shenimtza B'Yerushalayim, which is found in Yerushalayim, V'zeh Lishono, Zeh Lashon Zeh Perish, Asher Hu B'Tfus Miperek Ve'elu Menachos Ad Shtei Alechem. And that is what we have now included for these next 4 chapters. So, because Eino Miperish yet Rashi, that what we have, what we have on the left-hand side of the page, he doesn't think is Rashi. Behu shel Parsha Acher, V'zelash and Rashi Kisvei Yad. And in fact, this is in fact what Rashi said in the bottom, and it's a Kisvei Yad. Now you'll see that sometimes the comments are identical. Some people suggest that it's Rabbeinu Gershom, which is a grandson of Rashi. But in any event, the bottom line is that we will be using both of them as we move forward.
Who's writing that commentary that you just read? Who's writing that?
That commentary is probably the editor of the Vilna Shas, who put this into the Gemara, meaning whoever first incorporated this kisvei yad, that edition of the Gemara is the editor of that is the one who put that writing in. That obviously isn't written by Rabbi Ashkenazi because it actually refers to him in the third
Right,
person as
right.
Zecher Tzadik Levracha. But so that's my expectation as to who wrote that.
So the editor was 500 years ago, or was it someone
So
recent?
this is it's less than 500 years ago.
Whatever,
Rabbi
what,
Ashkenazi
300,
died.
200? I don't
Yeah,
know.
it died in 1590s. So it would be again, I don't. I mean, we can
Well, that's
just
close
do
to
a quick.
500 years. That's
Yeah,
400.
yeah.
I
Well,
mean,
again, so the question of sort of like when was the Vilna Shas, um,
no, I'm
first.
asking, is this something recent that this editor
Yeah,
wrote this
no, I
down
don't think
in the
so. I
last 20
think
years or in the last hundreds of
no,
years?
well, I think it's in the last 200 years,
Right.
right? The Vilna Shas was, I'm now just jumped to Wikipedia to check. The Vilna Shas, was published, in the 1870s and
Uh-huh.
originally planned in the 1830s. So it wouldn't surprise me if, I don't know whether it existed before then or not, but that would be, if I had to guess about when this was written, that would be my guess is sometime in the 19th century. Like I said, it could be that it was incorporated earlier, but I know, obviously we know that it's in the Vilna Shas. I don't know whether it was in any earlier editions. Okay.
Wasn't the one who compiled this Bomberg, Daniel Bomberg, isn't that the name?
Uh, I am not
I
sure.
read this. I think I said the name right, but they're called the Bomberg Shas, and he was the one who compiled the compiler, the editor of the current Shas that we have. I think
Well,
I
and
remember
that,
that name. I think
no,
I
that's
Bon.
that is the Bomberg Shas was the Venice Shas, and that was the Shas that got Rabbi Ashkenazi upset because that Shas put just the Rashi that we have on the left-hand side of the page
Uh-huh.
and not the Kisvei Yad. So that's what you are referring to. Thank you for raising the name because I knew it was the Venice Shas, but I didn't know what the who was the one who organized it. And you're exactly right. It's Daniel Bomberg, and that was between 1520 and 1523. That was the sort of first complete edition of the Talmud Bavli, and it definitely the layout of it what is the layout that we are familiar with today. So that's some additional background there. But thank you for raising that. Okay, so let's go back to our daf, and we are going to now talk about Kmitza. We've talked a lot about Kmitza before, but here we're going to talk about the fact that the leftover, the Shirayim, are going to the Kohen. So let's take a look and we'll see our Mishnah. We'll also see a chance to do a little chazara on something that we saw about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Let's take a look. Here are the mincha offerings where you do kamitza, and the remnants are left for the Kohen. What's omitted in the middle there is obviously that kamitza, the komates that you took a kamitza from is going to get burned on the altar, and that then is what permits the shirayim. But in any event, these are the minchas that have both the kamitza and the kohanim get to eat. So one minchas hasolas, and Rashi tells us. And when I say Rashi, I mean the originally put Rashi on the left-hand side of the page. When we mean the Kisvei Yad, I will note that specifically, and we'll go there instead. But here it actually doesn't matter. It's the same comment in both locations. Mincha sos haisa nikmetzes isa. It's called a fine flour mincha because it was never baked beforehand. For most of the even though we often refer to minchas as a flour offering, the in most cases the mincha or most types of mincha, the mincha was baked or fried before it was burned on the altar. So here, though, the mincha, the kmitza was taken from a flour-based mixture. Now it had oil in it, so as a result, it was more doughy, and so that's why Rashi says that it was taken as a dough. The hamachvas, that is the griddle mincha offering, where it's fried in a very flat pan. Marcheshes, the pan-based, the deeper pan frying mincha offering, where as a result of the deeper frying, it's going to be a softer, more spongy-like bread. V'hachalot, then the loaves where it's baked in an oven. V'harakikin, it's also this is like a flat wafer, but also baked in an oven. Minchas ovdei kochavim, the mincha of an idolater. Minchas noshim, the mincha of a woman. Minchas haomer, the mincha of the omer. That was what we talked about last chapter significantly. Minchas chote, the mincha of a sinner. And Rashi tells us in clarifying that this is not just any sinner. Minchas chote shel Yisrael. We're talking about a non-Kohen sinner. Nikmatzas. That's who gets kmitza. Aval minchas chote shel Kohanim. If the sinner is a Kohen, lo haita nikmetzes klal, then there wouldn't be any kmitza at all. Elakula haisa kolel. It will all be burned up. As we will see, there is a machlokas about that in our Mishnah. And finally, back into the Mishnah, uminchas kanos, and the mincha of jealousy, that is the mincha associated with a sota. So Rabbi Shimon says, Minchas chote shel kohanim nikmetzes. That unlike the Tanakama, as highlighted by Rashi, unlike the Tanakama, the Rabbi Shimon says that the sinner's mincha does have a kmitza. And how? But aren't you supposed to burn the whole thing? After all, the Torah tells us that the mincha offering of a Kohen all gets burned. Well, yes, that's true. The kometz karev la'atzmo, v'shirayim krivim la'atzman. That the kometz that was taken gets burned on the altar by itself, and the leftovers get burned by themselves. And so, as a result, that's how it works. But there is kmitza. Significantly, what Rabbi Shimon is highlighting for us is that kmitza and leftovers for the Kohen are not necessarily 100% tied together. We will come back to that issue very shortly. Amar of Papa, in a statement that will be somewhat of a chazara, kol hecha de tanan, eser tanan, that everywhere where we learn menachos, there are 10. Now, two different interpretations that we gave to this all the way back on Nun Tet Amud Aleph. Rashi offered us two interpretations. And one last point on the Rashi issue. The Rashi on all the other chapters where we don't have a Kisvei Yad, for whatever reason, it seems like those truly are Rashi. There is no debate about that. Okay, so what did Rashi give us? Rashi gave us two explanations of what we mean here. Explanation number one is that it refers to the fact that our Mishnah lists 10 types of mincha offerings. So if you use my screen, you'll see that when we went through the Mishnah, there were 10 different kinds of offerings. Fine flour, griddle, pan, loaves, wafers, idolater, woman, omer, sinner, and jealousies. So that's 10. And so that's one interpretation of what it means to have 10. The other interpretation is that in each of these cases, we are supposed to have 10 loaves, 10 of whatever it is that we're doing, 10 of them as part of the mincha offering. So that could be the other interpretation that Rashi offers. So my Kamashmalan, what in the world is he trying to teach us? Especially, and we'll either way, what is he trying to teach us? Meaning we know that they're supposed to be 10. So la pukim and Rabbi Shimon. It's to distinguish from Rabbi Shimon. Well, and not the Rabbi Shimon in our Mishnah, but Rabbi Shimon de Amar, mechza chalos or mechza rakikin yavi, kamash malan delo. So Rabbi Yishimon says that you could bring, when it comes to the oven baked mincha, that you don't have to bring either all loaves or all wafers, but rather you could bring 5 loaves and 5 wafers. You could bring half and half, and that would still be a valid mincha. So if you're telling me that there are 10 different kinds of mincha that are listed in our Mishnah, well, then this would be Mishnah number 11. This would be mincha number 11 for our Mishnah. And if you tell me that you need to have 10 identical loaves, well, again, this would say that you don't need to have 10 identical loaves because there is one kind of mincha where you could have 2 sets of 5. So that is how we learn these. That's what we can learn from based on each of the interpretations that Rashi gave way back when. Here, it seems like Rashi's focused on the 10 being that we list 10 different kinds of mincha in our Mishnah. And you'll remember that we saw this comment both with respect to the Mishnayos, back on Nun Tet Amud Aleph and on Samach Amud Aleph. And then obviously we have that comment again right here. Okay, so now we go back to V'shireihem leKohanim. We say in our Mishnah that the leftovers go to the Kohanim. So the Gemara wants to know, Minalan, how do we know that that's the case? Diksiva, ksiva, udalo ksiva, lo kasiv ba, v'zos Toras hamincha, hakrai bosa b'nei Aaron, v'anoseres mimena yochlu Aaron uvanav. Well, we have 2 different possibilities for where we learn it from. This is kind of an obvious question the Gemara is highlighting. When it says it in the Torah, it says it specifically in the Torah. And the Torah offers a general rule that in Vayikra Perek Vav, which is this week's Parsha, beginning of this week's Parsha, Psukim Zayin and Tet, it says this is the law of the Mincha. The sons of Aaron shall bring it, and what is left, Aaron and his sons shall eat. So it all works out perfectly that I don't even understand why you're asking me the question. It's so obvious the answer. So ba'achitin lo kami alan. You're right. I'm not asking you about traditional wheat-based mincha offerings. Ki kami bailan. Where I'm asking you about is in connection with barley. And Rashi tells us, what do you mean by barley mincha offerings? Kagon minchas ha'omer or minchas kenos. Well, this is, for example, the mincha of the omer offering. That's, again, wonderful Daf Yomi coincidence because we're about, a week or so away from the second day of Pesach when the Omer offering would be brought, and the mincha of jealousy, namely, again, the mincha that's brought in connection with the sota. Both of those are from barley. So, ba'sorinami midiknik metzes shirah kohanim. But I don't understand. Based on the rabbis in our Mishnah, wherever you do kamitza, the kohanim get the rest. And so, as a result, just as you have kamitza by a wheat-based mincha offering and the rest goes to the Kohen, so too, when you have kamitza done for a barley offering, you're going to have the rest go to the Kohanim. Not a question. No reason to even think that you would have something different. So, aliba de Rabbanan lo kami bailan. You know what? I'm not actually asking you according to the rabbis, because you're right. According to the rabbis, it is obvious that you, in fact, would have the barley mincha offerings, the remnants go to the Kohanim. Ki kami bailan, aliba de Rabbi Shimon. I'm asking you based on Rabbi Shimon. De amar ika mincha de mikamsa velo mitachla. Because Rabbi Shimon notes that there are mincha offerings, namely the mincha offering of a Kohen who's a sinner, where you do take kamitza, but the remnants are not eaten. So Ditanan, Rabbi Shimon Omer, Minchas Chotesh al Kohanim Nikmetzes HaKometz v'Karav ba'atzma v'Shirayim Karavim ba'atzman. That again, Rabbi Shimon says that you take kamitza of the sinner's mincha if the sinner is a Kohen, and the Kometz gets offered, and the rest gets offered. And so as a result, Minalan, how do I know that when it comes to the Omer and the Minchas Kenos, of a sota, that in fact, in both those cases, we're going to have the Kohanim eat the leftover flour from barley. Maybe you should analogize those situations to the mincha of a Kohen who is a sinner and say that just like you do kamitza and you burn the whole thing for a Kohen who's a sinner, maybe you would do the same thing for the Omer and the Minchas Kanos. So we're going to have two answers to this possibility. One we're going to give now, and the second will give much of the way down into the daf of Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. So Amar Chizkiah to Amar Kra, because we have a pasuk that says Mikol mincha belula b'shemen, every mincha that is mixed with oil, v'charava and v'chareva, and every mincha chareva, excuse me, and every mincha that is dry, l'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh, that is going to be for Aaron and his sons. And so, im eno inyan levlula shal chitin, and we don't need this to tell us anything about a mincha that's mixed with oil, because we know that from other psukim, as we already saw. We saw that, in fact, it says, this is the law of the mincha, the sons of Aaron shall bring it, and what is left of it, Aaron and his sons will eat. So, and in other places, it actually tells you that Aaron and his sons get the shirayim. So we don't need it to know about wheat base. So as a result, Tinai Inyan Livalula Shel Seorim. So all right, so you learn it to a barley offering that is mixed with oil. And what mincha is barley mixed with oil? That's the Omer offering. Vim Eno Inyan Lichareva. And that, in fact, Rashi tells us, L'chareva shel sa'orim, I'm sorry, Blula shel sa'orim, the last, now the beginning of the last line in Rashi, Mincha sa'omer. That's referring to the Mincha of the Omer. And then, V'im eno inyan l'chareva shel chitin. And then what about the dry aspect? We don't need, again, the dry aspect to tell us anything about a dry wheat offering. So taneu inyan l'chareva shel sa'orin. So apply it to a dry barley offering that's mincha. And what is that? L'chareva shel sa'orim. Rashi tells us minchas kenos. That's referring to the mincha of jealousy of a sota. All right. So now
well, what is the mincha of the chitin? Rashi's the charavash the chitin kagon mincha ma'afa.
Yeah, that's a baked mincha.
I know, but which one is that? Which is
those are the rakikin and the chalot. Both of them are ma'afat. Those are both baked. So,
but for what purpose is that again? No, that's not. Is that for a chatat?
The point is that we all no, those are voluntary offerings.
Oh,
the point is that those offerings, we know the leftovers go to the kohen, and so as a result, we don't need to teach. So that this pasuk doesn't need to come to teach us anything about those cases, and so as a result, that's why we can now use the same principle to teach us about the other cases, namely the Omer and the Minchas Kenos. So now we're going to ask a very long question. The long question is because we're going to have a very long brisa. So we'll see, and the key element of that brisa is the following question. One second. You are trying to use Vayikra Perek Zayin Pasuk Yud, and again, that's all this week's parsha. So that we're really nice Daf Yomi coincidence this week. That all in Parshas Tzav. So Minayin. So again, we're going to use that same verse for another teaching, and that teaching is not going to be to tell us about the fact that a mincha from barley is eaten, the leftovers of a mincha from barley is eaten by the Kohanim. So let's take a look and see what that verse is used to teach us. So Minayin, the brisa begins, Minayin she'ein cholkim menachos keneged zvachim. And it's going to be used to teach us various rules about the fact that you cannot trade. Basically, if Kenneth and I were both Kohanim, and we said, you know what, Ken, I am a vegan. Why don't we do the following? I'll give you
my. But I'm a vegan. I'm actually the vegan.
Oh, you're actually vegan. Oh, fabulous. Okay, terrific. So you're a vegan. So you give to me your share of the animal sacrifices, and I will give to you my share of all the mincha sacrifices. So we are going to learn that basically all trades like that are invalid. So how do I know that we can't make that division, that we can't divide where I take the animal sacrifices and Kenneth takes the mincha sacrifices? Rashi clarifies. Keneged zvachim, last Rashi on the daf, Shalo Yomar HaKohen, that the Kohen wouldn't say L'chaveiro to his friend, Tola Tazvachim, you take the animals, Vani Menachot, and I'll take the mincha offerings. So how do I know that you can't do that? So we turn to Ayin Gimel Amid Aleph, Talmud Lomar, V'chol mincha asher te'afeh, and the pasuk actually doesn't have the letter hey in it, so we take out the hey. Kol mincha asher te'afeh batanur, every mincha that is baked in the oven, and then and that's what it says in verse Vayikra Parak Zayin Pasuk Tet, and then the pasuk continues in Pasuk Yud. It says, "L'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh ish kachiv." It'll be for all the sons of Aaron, every man alike. So Yachol lo yachlaku Menachot keneged zvachim shelo. Now I might have thought that the limitation was only a mincha against animal offerings shelo kamu takteim bedalot, because you can never offer a mincha offering instead of an animal offering, right? Even when you have somebody who's very poor and they're changing from an animal offering to something less, the first thing that you change to is a bird offering. And only after you go to the bird offering, then do you go down to the mincha offering. You don't go directly from an animal offering to a mincha offering. So,
Would he have to assess then that he can't afford the bird offering either?
Yes. The point is I think it's done voluntarily, meaning the person himself tells you what he can afford. I don't know that there's a judgment. We never when we looked at the korbanei, the korban olav yored, the variable
Korban Olav Yored, right.
we never talked about how one makes that assessment, but presumably it is done by the person himself saying, listen, I just can't afford it. But in any event, the bottom line is that the substitution is not directly from an animal to a mincha. But maybe because you would switch from a bird to a mincha, maybe Kenneth and I could do the following trade. I'll take all the bird offerings and he'll take all the mincha offerings. Because if somebody who's poor and is very poor would switch between the two. So Talmud Lomar, v'chol na'aseh b'marcheshes, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. Again, so the point is that verse, and let's just read the entire verse so that we have it. The entire verse is, V'chol mincha asher te'afeh b'tanur, every mincha that is baked in the tanur, v'chol na'aseh b'marcheshes, and all that's done in a pan, in a pan, v'al machavas, or in a grin, or on a griddle, la kohen. It should be to the Kohen. Hamakrivo talotiyeh. Should be to the Kohen for him it'll belong. V'chol mincha blula, and every mincha that is mixed bashemen with oil, v'chariba, or is dry, l'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh ish kachiv. For every one of the children of Aaron, it'll be to him like his brother. Now, the point is that we're going to note the fact that four different kinds of mincha, four different kinds of offerings are mentioned here. And so as a result, we're going to expand the concept of not making an exchange four different times. The first is to tell us you can't do an exchange between a mincha and a zebach. Now we're telling us you can't do an exchange between a mincha and a bird. And we're going to continue as we move forward. So again, yachol lo yachlaku, continue back into the Gemara. And now again, just so that we know where we are, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines down, middle of the line. So yachol yachluku menachos keneged ophos. All right, so fine. You've shown that you can't trade mincha and bird offerings. Shalalu meaning damim, v'alalu meaning kamachim. Maybe it's because one has flour and one has blood. So yachluku ophos keneged zvachim. But maybe you could do birds and animals. Shahalalu v'halalu mine damim, because they all have blood. So Talmud Lomar al machabas. So again, it added another kind of korban. L'kol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. It could have just said one of these korbanayim. Is the korbanot. The fact that it said all of them, that is showing us that in fact you cannot make even this additional trade. So now we have three trades you can't make: mincha for zevach, a mincha for an animal, a mincha and a mincha for a bird, and a bird for an animal. Yachalo yachalku ofos keneged zvachim shahalalu asiyatan biyad v'halalu asiyatan b'kli. Well, maybe birds and animals are different because birds are slaughtered with their hands when you do malika, but animals are slaughtered with a knife. But maybe you can do one mincha against another mincha, she'elu ve'elu asyatam biyad, because they're all done by hand. So Talmud Lomar, b'chol mincha b'lulav v'shemen, l'chol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. Again, another kind of offering is mentioned in the verse, and so that shows that even that kind of exchange is not possible. So we've now eliminated all the different kinds of exchanges that are across different kinds of, and even within the mincha offering. So yachol lo yachalku machavas keneged marcheshes. Well, maybe when it says you can't trade a one mincha for another, it's talking about where you're trading a griddle mincha for a pan mincha, because bar marcheshes keneged machavas, and vice versa. Shizoma sa kashim, because the griddle is going to be hard. Vizomas rakin, and the marcheshes, the pan, is going to be soft. Aval yachlaku, because of all the oil that is going to get absorbed. Aval yachlaku machvas keneged machvas, but maybe you could do within each category a machvas against a machvas, umarcheshes keneged marcheshes. So Talmud Lomar v'charei v'alachol b'nei Aaron tiyeh. The dry will be all for Aaron. So again, we have essentially 5 different kinds of offerings. I said 4 earlier. I meant 5. So we got 5 different kinds of offerings that you can't that are involved here, and so as a result, that's how we know that you can't make any of these trades.
Wouldn't it be sufficient to say mincha for mincha? Why do we have to say marcheshet mincha
No, that
marcheshet?
was the last category. You're right. We did already say mincha and mincha. But
Right.
now the question is maybe the different minchas maybe you're right that you can't go trade a marcheshes to a machavat, because those are different kinds of minchas. But maybe if you stayed within one kind of mincha, you would be allowed to make a trade. And the pasuk is telling us that you can't even make a trade within a kind of mincha.
I
So
would think that once you say mincha v'mincha, that would be inclusive.
no, it's not necessarily. That's why the Gemara specifically noted the fact that a marcheshes is going to be soft because it's got absorbed a lot of oil, where a machvas is hard, and so maybe the density associated with the offering could impact the ability to switch. But now we're going to. But in the end, we learned that you're right. In the end, we say that you can't even switch within a mincha. That's exactly right. So now, last point in terms of trading.
So that would be a 6th one then, right?
Well, we had, I mean, we had no trading zevach. Let's count them
Right.
together. No trading zevach for mincha. No trading a bird
Zevach la'of.
the bird for, well, first we had bird for mincha, then we had oh no, you're right, zebach la'of. Let's go through the order, right? So first we had
All right.
yes, first we had a zebach and mincha, then we had mincha and oaf, then we had zebach and mincha, then we had mincha and mincha, and now we have dry, soft and hard. So even within a mincha. So
Well,
you're right.
I'm
That's
thinking,
5.
well, those are 2 types of mincha. But what about a minchat marcheshet and minchat marcheshet?
Yes, that's what we just did.
No, no, we said minchat marchvat and minchat marchvat. But let's say one person's minchat marcheshet and another minchas
no. It
mincha
says it right
marcheshet.
here. You take a look at the Gemara, right? So we're now you have to take one uh um which 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15,
It says
16,
machvat keneged
17.
machvat.
It says aval yaklu machvat keneged machvat umarcheshet keneged marcheshes. So I might have thought you could do either one of those trades, either a machvat with another machvat or a marcheshes within another marcheshes. Talmud lomer v'chareva. And then it says chareva, it should be dry. So l'chol b'nei chareva l'chol b'nei Aaron to
Right, I understand. So what my question is that define this even more and say yes, machvat keneged machvat marcheshet. How about machvat keneged marcheshet? That would be a sixth
No, that
category.
was the previous one. That was the previous one we said. Marchesh, that was if you go up 6 or 7 lines, it says Aval Yachloku Menachot Keneged Menachot. That I might have thought you could do any mincha
So
for
that is
any
the
other
fourth one.
mincha. So when we eliminated that, that was what eliminated the marcheshes for the machbat. Okay, so
Yeah, okay,
Yaakov, we got to
okay,
go on. So
okay.
Yaakov lo Yaakov kodesh kodeshim. So I might have thought that you could switch. You can't switch within the kodesh kodeshim because that's all what we've been talking about Yaakov kodeshim column. But maybe when you deal with the sacrifices that the owner itself could eat, maybe you would be allowed to do the trading. Talmud lomar ish ke'achiv v'im al todah. Well, here we have the everybody gets the same and in 2 psukim later, we're told about the Toda offering. So that juxtaposition teaches us, Kashem she'ein cholkin b'kodshe kodshim, kach ein cholkin b'kodshim kalim. So just as you can't trade when you're within the kodshe kodshim, you can't trade when you're in the kodshim kalim. Ish, and now the Brisa adds 2 different points that don't relate to trading. So in the end, we have essentially 6 trades that we've prohibited. And then it says, Ish cholek abafilu balmum, that a person gets a share even if they have a blemish, meaning even if they can't offer the offering. If they're a kohen who's on duty, they get their share. Ve'ein katan cholek va'afilu tam, but a minor doesn't get a share even if he doesn't have a blemish. Okay, so the bottom line is though this whole brisa was to show that we use this verse for another purpose. So how could we use it to teach us that you're allowed to have that the Kohen gets the remnants of the barley offerings, barley mincha offerings? So haomi kol nafka. No, that brisa we learned everything from the word kol because it kept saying kol b'nei, kol in front of each of the words in the pasuk. It says v'kol mincha asher te'afeh. V'kol mincha belula. So that's how we learned it. Apikte, look at the Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda. But 1 second, we use the word kol to teach us the lesson of Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda. And what was that lesson? So Rashi tells us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 lines down in Rashi. Last word on the line, ha pikte, l'kol mincha belula, le'el beperakol menachos, daf samach gimel bet, ulked Rabbi Yossi, Rabbi Yehuda, de amar ma kol ha'amar lamata shnei minin, that just as we had above that there below that there are 2 different types, meaning that when it's said marcheshes and machabat, those are 2 different types and you don't mix them. So too, when it says the wafers and the loaves, those are 2 different types and you don't mix them. That was the lesson that we learned from that. And so as a result, that we already have a lesson that we learn from from the word kol. So that can't be it. So as a result, we update our answer. Elahu mi vikol. The and is what's relevant. And so here we learn from the rest of the verse, and the Brisa is teaching us from the fact that it says vikol, and specifically it says vikol mincha at the beginning of pasuk tet, and it says vikol mincha at the beginning of pasuk yud in Vayikra Zion. Again, all in this week's Torah portion. Okay, so that was
What is the
answer number
learning
one.
here then? What is the Iker learning here then from the
The
Kohen?
Iker learning is that, in fact, the lesson that we try to learn, the teaching number one of Chizkiah, that we learn from Vayikra Perek Zion Pasuk Yud, that it didn't need to teach us anything about wheat-based mincha offerings. So as a result, we learn that just as with wheat-based offerings, the remnants go to the Kohen, so too with barley offerings. So that was the main point. And the question was, hey, we use that verse for something else? The answer is we used a different part of the verse. It wasn't the entire verse, so we still had the ability to learn this lesson. Now Ravina gives a new answer.
But we're also,
Ravina,
aren't we learning you can't switch things?
yes, that's the other lesson that we learned from it, but it's not from the same words that we
Okay.
needed to teach the barley lesson. So Asya Midatani Levi, it's like the Levi taught. The Tani Levi, kol korbanam, l'kol minchasam, l'kol chatasam, l'kol ashamam. Kol korbanam. What do we? So every offering, they're every mincha, they're every chatas, they're every asham. That is a pasuk that says, "What are the gifts of the Kohanim?" This is the pasuk in Bamidbar Perak Yurchet pasuk Tet. So Kol Karbanam Larabos Log Shem and Shom Tzora. The Kol Karbanam teaches us that the Kohanim get the remnants of the Log Shemen that are put on the ear and the thumb and the big toe of a Mitzora who's going through the purification process. Because I might have thought, Mina Eish Kasav Rachmana. The Torah tells us from the fire, meaning that only things that go on the fire, on the Mizbeach, you get the remnants from. And here, none of the Shemen goes on the fire, it all goes on the Mitzora. So, Kamash Malan, that's why Kol Korbanam tells us the fact that it includes that. Now, the part that's relevant for us, l'kol minchasam, l'rabos minchas ha'omer or minchas kanaos. That tells us that the mincha of the omer and mincha of jealousies are for the Kohanim, meaning namely the two minchas that are made out of barley. So this shows that so Ravina has now offered us a different lesson that teaches us the key point that even though Rabbi Shimon notes that sometimes you can take a kamitza and there is no gift for the Kohen, here the fact is that those mincha offerings, both the mincha of the omer and the mincha of the jealousies, the remnants do go to the Kohanim. So now, and how? What would I have thought? Why would I think that they wouldn't get it? Because the Torah says, as part of what the gift, Amar Rahmana, the Torah says that some of the gifts are because they're going to eat them, those who received atonement through them, meaning that the Kohanim get to eat what they offer that provides atonement for others. But Vahai Lahater Kasya, when it comes to other kinds of offerings, so when it comes to the Omer, it's not coming to create atonement. Lahatir kasya, it's coming to permit. It permits the eating of the new grain. The idach, and when it comes to the mincha kanos, the jealousy mincha, nami levar kasya, it's not coming to purify. It's not coming to atone. Excuse me. It's coming to clarify whether or not this woman had an affair. So Kamash Malan, so that's why the Torah specifically needs to teach us l'kol minchasam, to tell us that the mincha of the omer and the mincha of the jealousies are given to the Kohanim. And that's the main point that we want to get from this brisa, that's the second teaching, that's the second answer to the question of how we know that even according to Rabbi Shimon, the mincha of the omer, of the barley minchas, the remnants go to the Kohanim. But we're going to finish the brisa. L'kol chatasam, that the fact that it says every chatas, l'rabas chatas ha'of, it comes to include the bird chatas. Why would you think that it wouldn't include the bird chatas? Salkadai takamina, because I would have thought in Nevelahi it's considered a dead animal. Because how do you kill the bird in the Beis Hamikdash? Through malika. And malika outside the Beis Hamikdash, you would not be allowed to eat it. So Kamash Malan. So that's why it comes to teach us that you can. L'kol ashamam, when it says every asham, l'rabas asham nazir v'asham mitzora, it comes to include the asham of the nazir and the asham of the mitzora. 1 second, asham mitzora v'hedrik sivbei. 1 second, you can't tell me that the Kol Hashamam is telling us about an Asham, a Mitzora's Asham. That is explicit in the Torah that the Kohen gets to eat. No, ki kachatas ha'asham hula kohen. That it's like a chatas and it's an asham for the Kohen. That's a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Yudalid, pasuk Yud Gimel, and so as a result, that we don't need to tell us. So what? So reread the brisa Ella Larabos Asham Nazir. Asham Mitzorah. No, it's telling us that the Asham Nazir is treated like the Asham Mitzorah, meaning that it gets given to the Kohen. Now, why would you think that the Asham Nazir would not get given to the Kohen? Because what it is allowing you to do, it's permitting you to re-begin your Nazir status. And so as a result, it is not an atonement of some kind. So Kamash Milan, even so, the Tameh Nazir's Asham is considered a present for the Kohen. Asher Yashivu, that they return to me. Zeg Gezel Hager, that refers to the stolen objects of a convert, that if somebody were to steal from a convert and swear falsely that they didn't steal from the convert, and then the convert dies without any heirs, who gets it? The Kohanim. So lecha hu uvanecha, and then continuing on in the pasuk, right? We've explained every word in the pasuk of Bamidbar Perek Yudchet pasuk Tet. So what does it mean that it should be yours and your sons? Shalchahu uvanecha afilu l'kadesh bo esaisha. It so belongs to you that it even means that you can marry a woman with it. Now Rashi here suggests that this refers to all of the above categories, but there's a problem because Rashi is misquoting in the language here, and it's noted in the Mesoras Hashas letter Chet, misquoting the Gemara in Kedushin, where it says that you're not married. And so as a result, the other way to understand Rashi is actually to incorporate that, and really this is just a reference to the Gezel Hager case, that when somebody steals from a convert, and then the convert dies and has no heirs, and the return is made now to the Kohanim, that object that is returned to the Kohanim belongs completely to the Kohen. It is not like a sacrifice, and therefore it can be used even to marry a woman with her. Okay, so that finishes the first question that we had in the Gemara, and having referenced the mincha of an idolater, now the Gemara quotes a ruling about other sacrifices of an idolater, which will be challenged from our Mishnah.
So it's no longer considered gezela?
Sorry?
In that case, it's no longer considered gezela?
No, it's considered, that's the atonement. The way the thief can atone for the stealing is by returning the stolen object along with a 1/5 penalty and offer a korban, and then that will fix the situation. But because he cannot return it to any of the family members, he returns it to the Kohanim. But it's still obviously a sin. You're not allowed. You're not allowed to do it. And we're not talking about. All right. So, okay. Amar Rav Huna. Now we turn to Ayin Gimel and Bet. We got to get moving. Shalmei ha'ovdei kochavim. The shlamim of a non-Jew. Olo. They're considered an ola, meaning. And Rashi tells us not only the shlamim of the ovdei kochavim. Take a look at top Rashi. Ovdei kochavim shenadar lahevi shlamim. If a non-Jew makes a commitment, pledges to bring a shlamim, olod hein, they're brought as an ola, ve'ein ne'achalim, and they're not eaten. V'huadin, de mincha sam kalil, and similarly, their mincha would similarly be fully burned. So now we're going to use that basis to ask a question from our Mishnah. But before we get to our Mishnah, we're going to give the explanation. You could say that this is based on a verse, or you could say it's based on logic. You can say it's based on logic. That when a non-Jew offers a sacrifice, he thinks that the whole sacrifice is going to God. So as a result, that's going to be what his intention is. Or you could say it's based on a verse. Because what does the Torah say? This is a pasuk by Yikra Perak Kaf Bet, pasuk Yudchet. Asher yakrivu laHashem leolah. That literally it's read, Asher yakrivu laHashem leolah, that if the person tries to bring to Hashem as an olah. But you can also understand it as Asher Yakrivu LaHashem, that anything they want to bring for God, le'olah, it's going to be considered an olah. To call, as the Gemara continues, kol de makrevei olah leheve, everybody, anything that they want to bring, it's an Ola. It's going to be considered an Ola. So, Masiv Rav Chama Bar Guria. Rav Chama Bar Guria asked from the following Bryce, and we're going to have two questions from Bryces. That if an Ovid, a non-Jew, pledges to bring a shlamim, and he gives the shlamim to a Jew, to a Yisrael, the Yisrael gets to eat it. Nisanim LeKohen, if he gives it to the Kohen, HaKohen Ochlan. The Kohen gets to eat it. 1 second. You just said before, Rav Huna, that it's all burned as an Ola. How can we have a brisa that says that it's not burned as an Ola? So Amar Rava, Hachika Amar. This is what it's saying. Al Menashe is kaper behen Yisrael Ochlan. If the non-Jew gives it on the condition that a Yisrael will be atoned for it, well, then the Yisrael gets to eat it. Al Menashe is kaper behen Kohen Ochlan. If it's so that the Kohen gets to atone for it, the Kohen gets to eat it. And the Rashi tells us, last of the Y lines at the top of Rashi, Ka'amar Nastanan Yisrael Amanasi Yiskaper Bahen Yisrael, Kagonchi Ye Yisrael Mechuyev Shlomim. A Jew is obligated, a Yisrael is obligated to bring a shlamim. For example, if he made a pledge to bring a shlamim, v'nasanan ovid kochavim lahotzi yedei chavato, and the non-Jew wants to fulfill the obligation for this Jew. So Yizaka Yisrael, the Jew can babasar, the Jew gets possession of the meat v'ochlo, and he can eat it. Aval neder stam, but if the non-Jew made a simple pledge, shlamim, to bring a shlamim, nehave ola, then it would be an ola. Meaning, Rav Huna's statement is in fact correct. So Masav Rav Shizvi. Rav Shizvi asks also a challenge. Elu menachos nikmatzos v'shirein minkla kohanim minchas oved kochavim. But 1 second, our Mishnah itself specifically said that the mincha of an Ovid Avodah Zara would get eaten by the Kohanim, because that's one of the 10 that are listed where the remnants go to the Kohanim. So I'm Rabbi Yochanan lo kasha ha Rabbi Yossi Aglili ha Rabbi Akiva. Titania, we have a machlokas. We're in a brisa between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Yossi Aglili is going to say that non-Jews have the ability to offer a variety of different sacrifices, and Rabbi Akiva says no, all they can offer is an ola. Titania, ish matom v'lomer ish. In the pasuk in Parak Kaf Bet of Vayikra, Parak Yud Pasuk Yud Chet, it begins Ish mi Beis Yisrael. Why tell us Ish? Why not just have Ish mi Beis Yisrael? So L'Rabbos is of the Kocham. It's coming to tell you that a non-Jew has the ability to offer these offerings as well. Shenodrim Nidarim v'Nidavos Yisrael. They can make pledges and donate offerings just the way a Jew can. Asher Yakrivu LaHashem LaOlah, based on the pasuk of the fact that they will bring something and it's going to be an ola. Ein li ela ola. Well, that only tells us that they could bring an ola. Shlamim manayim. How do I know that they can also bring a shlamim? Talmud lomar nidreihen. Because it says they're vowed offerings. Toda minayin. How do I know that they could even bring a toda? Talmud lomar nidvosam. It says that they could bring their donated offerings. Minayin l'rabos ha'ofos v'hayayin v'halavona v'ha'etzim. How do I know that they could even bring birds and wine and lavona and wood? Talmud lomar nidreihem l'chol nidreihem. It says, it not only says neder, but it says their neder, plural, and it says kol nidreim. So that teaches us 2 additional things. And nidvosam, l'chol nidvosam. That teaches us 2 more additional things. So im kain matam alomer ola. Well, then why did it bother to specify specifically the ola? So Ola Prat Naziros, it's coming to exclude that you can't bring a Nazir offering because he can't become a Nazir. Dibri Rabbi Yossi Aglili. So the bottom line is, for Rabbi Yossi Aglili, a non-Jew can bring all types of offerings except for a Nazir-based offering.
And a Metzora? Can he bring a Metzora offering?
Well, if he were a Metzora, that's a good question. Not completely clear. Not completely clear. Meaning an Asher Mitzora, whether can a non-Jew become a Mitzora? I'm not sure that the non-Jew could ever become a Mitzora so that it would be applicable. I don't think the Saras applies to non-Jews. So Rabbi Akiva Omer Asher Yakrivu LaHashem LaOlah, that you bring it as an Ola, Ein li ela Ola Bilvad. And so very simple, Rabbi Akiva, whereas Rabbi Yossi Aglili had a long drasha. Rabbi Akiva's drasha is short and sweet and to the point. You can only bring an Ola. So, okay, so 1 second. So now we've V'hai Pratla Nazirus Mahacha Nafka. 1 second. You just said that you learned that Rabbi Yossi Aglili learned that you can't, that a non-Jew can't bring a Nazir offering from this pasuk in Vayikra, but Mehasam Naka. We learned elsewhere that a Nazir can't, that a non-Jew can't do it because it says in Bamidbar, in connection with the discussion of a Nazir, Daber b'nei Yisrael v'amarta lahem ish ki yafli net lindor neder Nazir lazir. If somebody decides to become a Nazir, why did it say b'nei Yisrael? B'nei Yisrael nodrin ve'ein ha'ovdi kolchavim nodrin. It's to tell us that the children of Israel have the ability. Jews can make them become Nazir, but a non-Jew cannot. Well, no, you know what? We need both of them because if I only had the verse in Vayikra, Hava Amina Korban Hu Delo Laiti, I would have thought that it's only the sacrifice that he can't bring. Aval Naziros Chala Alayhu, but he would actually become a Nazir. So Kamash Malan, we do need both. In fact, we do need both psukim. Okay, so now that we've detailed the views of Rabbi Yossi Aglili and Rabbi Akiva, the Gemara cites a Mishnah and a Brisa to identify whether the opinions therein are like one or the other of these two positions. So, Kaman Azla Hadatan, who is the author of the following Mishnah? The Mishnah is in the name of Rabbi Shimon, but is it like Rabbi Yossi Aglili or is it like Rabbi Akiva? Amar Rabbi Shimon, Shiva Dvarim Hiskinu Beis. There were 7 things that the court enacted, and this was one of them. If an idolater sends his ola from overseas, and he sends the libations with it, Kurivin Mishalo, we are going to allow them to bring them. V'im lav, but if he doesn't send the libations, because they have to have libations with them, Kravin Mishal Tzibor, the community will pay for the libations because we don't want to reject the non-Jews korban. Lema Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Do we have to say that this is only Rabbi Yossi Aglili? Because after all, it allows the bringing of Nesachim from a non-Jew below Rabbi Akiva, and it's not Rabbi Akiva? No, afilu tema Rabbi Akiva. Ola v'chol chaverata. When it says that Rabbi Akiva allows a non-Jew to bring an ola, it means that he allows you to bring the ola along with everything that goes with the ola, including the nesachim. So, man tana lahad tana rabbanan. What about the following? Ezra. The Torah says in Bamidbar, Parak Tesvav, Pasuk Yud Gimel, at the end of Parsha Shlach, that it says when it comes to the Nesachim, this is the source for the Nesachim, that you have to be a Jew. Ezra may be Nesachim, namely a Jew can bring Nesachim. The Ein Ha'ovid Kolchavim may be Nesachim, and a non-Jew cannot bring libations. Yochel lo tehei so to una Nesachim. Now I might have thought that it means that an ola that belongs to a non-Jew doesn't even have libations. Tamalomar kacha. So as a result, it says. So you should do the same thing, just like, and so as a result, clearly the idolaters' sacrifices do have nesachim. Now, money, who is this? Lo Rabbi Yossi Aglili, lo Rabbi Akiva. It's neither of them. Rabbi Yossi Aglili, because if you want to say it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili, ha'amar afilu yainami. It specifically said in the earlier brisa, we listed 4 different things that could be brought. And one of them was wine. So wine can be brought as a libation. So clearly he would allow it.
Isn't that yayin nesach? If the goy touches it, brings the wine?
So excellent point. The commentators then say that we must be talking about money for wine and not the wine itself. You're an excellent point, but that's how they deal with it. So, Rabbi Akiva, and if it's Rabbi Akiva, ha'amar ola in midi akrini lo. And if you say that it's Rabbi Akiva, how could we accept, how could we have that the korban that the non-Jew offered include libations? That's exactly what we said. So, Ibai Yisema Rabbi Yossi Aglili, Ibai Yisema Rabbi Akiva. Really, you could say it's either one of them. Ibai Yisema Rabbi Yossi Aglili. If you want, you could say it's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. You know what? Take out wine from that other brisa, and everything is fine. Ibai Yisema Rabbi Akiva. Or you could say it is Rabbi Akiva, and again, the answer that we gave a few moments ago, Ola v'chol chaverata. And when we say that you can bring an Ola, it means you can bring the Ola along with all of its all of its accoutrements, meaning all of the other things that go along with it. And so, as a result, in the end, we have these two different opinions. We have Rabbi Yossi Aglili, who allows non-Jews to bring any kind of sacrifice, and Rabbi Akiva, who says no, they can only bring an olah. And finally, to conclude, so our Mishnah, we had Rabbi Shimon say that the kamitza is done even for a sinner's mincha of a kohen. So now the Gemara is going to seek the source of that statement. But for that discussion, you'll have to stay tuned for tomorrow's daf. Wishing everybody a great day. There was a lot to cover today, so my apologies for going a little long.
It's okay.
Yeah.
You have a question?
Well, I mean, it'd be hard to imagine when we say that I'm just thinking that the non-Jew, he wants to send a sacrifice from overseas. Can you imagine now putting that animal on a plane and shipping it to Israel?
Well, it would have been on a boat. And
Okay, I
that's
understand.
a little bit more imaginable. I mean, clearly, animals traveled by boat. I mean, even in very early times, I'm sure animals traveled by
Right.
boat. So, but you're right. It is hard to imagine. It's much easier to imagine him sending a few gold pieces to buy
Right,
the animal.
exactly.
All right. Have a wonderful day.